See that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thanks very much, Debs. It's been a pleasure. I think it's been about maybe 3 years or possibly just over 3 years since I was able to do something in person when you had your expo over at Blackpool. So let's hope we can get back to doing some physical events and seeing people. We've talked about energies. I'm sure the energies are still floating around when we're online and all those sorts of things, but there's a far different connection when we're in that certain space and sphere. So appreciate the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lateef Badat from ALB Business and Confidence Coaching. I specialise in helping predominantly creative, digital, media and technology businesses get the most out of planning, strategy, sales, marketing, the whole gamut of ensuring that you as a person are transforming the way you're doing things and also then the business. It works in tandem. It's not just about the bricks and mortar. I'm on several social media channels. Feel free to connect. And there's a little website there if you want to have a look at the types of things I do. My first life coach came about as a result of a shoulder injury. And I remember the lady Jilly telling me about various other things she did. But I've always had an interest in things to do with alternative therapies, holistic therapies, even spirituality. I've been to mediums, psychics, and all sorts of people with the main intention of improving myself. That's what it's been about. And through that time, quite early on in my journey, I went to seek the services of our dear Zoe, and she became my first business coach. So these sorts of people have really, really helped me along the way. So I'm eternally grateful. Really nice to see Zoe again today. One of the things, as you probably know, I hope this talk doesn't turn out to be things that you kind of know inside out. I'm trying to give a different perspective, mainly mine. And I think Amanda mentioned a lot of the things about sometimes going through the darkness in order to see the light and although, so that's been a running theme right the way through my personal life, career, business, everything. And then through a lot of soul searching and a lot of review, feedback and constant growth and all those sorts of things. One of the things we get to look at is the programming that we've had, whether that's from parents, distant relations, school, whatever it might be. So one of the key things about the aspect of positive thinking and keeping it going in terms of the resilience is to ascertain how our brains think. What are the patterns? How often do they occur? And are they serving you well? How are they serving you on a day-to-day basis? And what times or what occasions would they might run into overdrive? And as we've heard before, whatever you put in is what you get out. So think about the brain as a hard drive. How many times are we doing a software update on our own minds, on our own brains? And something for me, which is really, really important, is to be able to do a number of different interconnected activities that help keep that at an optimum level. So one of the first things I would say is a lot of it to do with the mindset. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. I've had different researches when I've seen it. So some people say it's between 6,000 and 12,000 thoughts. Some people say it's up to 60,000 in a day in 24 hours. Now, if you looked at whatever the statistics were, how many actual thoughts we have, which is in the thousands, that's an opportunity each time to try to mirror what it is that we're trying to do in terms of being positive, in terms of serving others, in terms of serving ourselves. Do we actively take a break and consciously have some time out to assess what is going round in our head and what are we doing to change it? Now, quite quickly, what could happen is we might find ourselves on autopilot for one reason or another, especially when we're trying to move out of comfort zones, where sometimes the confidence levels may be a bit low. It could be due to a number of reasons, but whatever those reasons are, this negative self-talk does affect many, many people, even people in the holistic world sometimes, if it comes to one area they're not comfortable with or as learned as other people. Do you recognize your own negative self-talk? And then what does it tell you? And how do you aim to overcome it? What kind of things that do you do in order to overcome that? Because with the negative self-talk, if it starts running on autopilot, then what tends to happen there is we limit seeing opportunities because of inner-built fears, inner-built negative thinking patterns. It can lead to low motivation. So we struggle with the types of things we need to be getting on with, or new opportunities that we might seek. Less likely to stick to goals. There's the imposter syndrome that might kick in as well, about, it's never going to be good enough, you're not good enough, people are always better than you, and we're striving for perfection, and that can lead to increased stress and anxiety. It's not a very good place, and at worst, possible depression. So one of the important things, if it's not for yourself today, is maybe if this is something that is helpful or useful to you, is just to bear this in mind for when you're working with your own clients. 90% of negative self-talk is unhelpful and not reality. There's a lot of things sometimes that get floating around. Our brains are constantly active. Even when we're listening to something, we might be thinking of something else. It's perfectly natural. Do we give ourselves a daily dose of positivity in the format of an internal voice, internal dialogue? What is your default script that you have in your head about you? And how does that guide you on a day-to-day basis, first of all, personally, and then interactions with other people, especially on the business arena? For those who've done NLP or anything like that, if I said to you, whatever I want you to do is do not think about a pink elephant, a lot of people, in order to try and not think about the pink elephant, you naturally at least have a flashing of an image of a pink elephant first. So part of this is about not thinking about what you want to get away from, but more about what it is that you want. And with some of the questions I've asked earlier on, if you're looking at writing things down, reassessing where you're at in an open way, it will help you create a small plan. When I say small, because it's manageable, you can create a large plan. But I think it's really, really important in terms of planning for the future, going from the wants. So it's a kind of forward-based motivation, a motivation towards something as opposed to away from. We've got thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that we've probably seen or heard about before. And with this internal dialogue, if it's good, brilliant, because that would lead to heightened sense of, self-reassured feelings, confident feelings, positive feelings, which then lead to positive behaviors. Unfortunately, on the other side of the coin, if, for example, we do have a few thoughts that are unwanted, unhelpful, negative, quite quickly, they can start manifesting in different types of feelings, whether that's shortness of breath, whether that's mind spinning around, it starts to get foggy, whether that's sweaty palms, all those sorts of things, which then lead to a certain type of behavior, which may not help you when you're either speaking, when you're dealing with a client, if you've got people you need to contact in terms of sales with your business, whatever it might be. The trick here is, if you can see my mouse, where this blue arrow is to try and interrupt this cycle here, where the blue arrow comes in. So at what point do you start recognizing you've got an unwanted or a negative thought? What were you doing at that particular time? What led to that? Was it a phone call? Was it an email that you received? Was it something that you submitted, like a bid or a tender or a partnership that you're thinking of going, and something's happened and you have somehow created a set of feelings that are not going to be useful for you? And at what point can you then eradicate those before they start before they start going into this feeling section? Now, one of the first things about this is to be aware. Some people go through life, unfortunately, or go through days where they're not aware of the feelings going on autopilot. And I think many of us will probably end up working with them or helping them. But for ourselves, it's probably maybe at a different stage. So it's maybe recognizing how quickly we see those things and what do we do about them in order to change the feeling, which helps to change the behavior. So we need something called a pattern interrupt. So I've got a few weird and wonderful ways that I do it, and a few other people I've helped, it's worked for them. that if, for example, I was sat here 10, 15 minutes before the session, Zoom's gone down, the computer's not playing, time's ticking on, and maybe there's only 3 minutes to go, and I'm, could lead to panicking a bit. So I might decide a number of things. So what's the practical things? Let Debs know. The other things I can do is either write something down or very quickly in my head, say to myself, it's going to be okay. Try every single thing in terms of the technology aspect, even if it means moving away from my workstation for a couple of minutes and returning. Then there's lots of other things you can do, things that you might use in your own practices. The simplest one I tend to use is just some form of breathing exercise, deep breathing. I tend to move away from everything I'm doing. That's just one. If I'm sat down somewhere and I'm reading an email, it might trigger the adrenaline or something, might decide to close the email down, do something else, and maybe return to it after. Because normally, depending on what types of emails they are, I don't really get that response, no matter what type of email it is. I can look at it objectively. So if something's kicked in, it's there for a reason. So how do I deal with that? So these pattern interrupts really do help. Other ones are like if you listen to music, if you listen to some sort of healing meditation type stuff, try that. What I've found sometimes is if you get into a heightened state of kind of adrenaline, stress, those sorts of things, initially going into a deep relaxation state doesn't always work because you're quite pumped up. So I've done little silly exercises, I've done even burpees, and I've gone out for a little walk for 5 or 10 minutes. I've done whatever it is to first of all match that level of breathing, and then confuse my brain into thinking it's more, my deep breathing is more to do with me just doing this exercise or the walk. It's reframing that thought in terms of it's more excitement. And once I start coming down or calming down, I can then again in a separate room go through something like a initial focus in the moment type meditation, like a mindfulness thing. So, but the question I would ask you there is, what kind of things do you think would work for you? If you needed to interrupt your pattern of thoughts, if they're not conducive to what you're trying to do, what could you install yourself? Some of the thoughts we often come across, there's no evidence towards them. So if something does pop in your head, or somebody else's head for that matter, we need to look at what the evidence is for that thing. And I've been able to do this over a number of years because I used to be the one that used to spend hours and hours and hours kind of beating myself up about something that was non-existent, and then I'd be tired and lethargic and the brain would be shutting down. When if I looked at everything, there was no substance to it. There was nothing saying that, I'm not going to get a sale, or the client's going to do this and that, or whatever it might be. There was no evidence. And even if there was this thing when you're doing in your business about risk assessment, I started using strategies about, assessing if it's a low risk, medium risk, or a high risk. So it was done as me being my own coach, if that makes sense, which is difficult sometimes because it all goes out the window sometimes. When it hits the fan, all the techniques we've used and practiced for that split second, and that's why I was saying earlier on, is how long does it take you to get back to your ground, your source, and think, right, okay, let's get a hold of this. So look for the evidence. You can write things down, return to it again. If you've got trusted friends, people in your network, you can maybe discuss it with them. That's really, really good because they'll give you it as it is, especially if you've got a really good friend, and not only be able to give you the objective opinion, but they'll tell you to get a wriggle on as well if you're spending a lot of time and energy on something that just isn't there. This is something I learned when I was doing my various qualifications in NLP. But the chap who taught us, I've got his voice, which is a Liverpudlian accent in my head going, how do you know? And he would question a lot of the things in terms of people's thinking, patterns. And if you said one thing, he'd more or less repeat the same thing. But how do you know that? How do you know this? Which is slightly coaching desired. But either way, you will find there's not much evidence, if any, when you ask yourself, well, how do you know that it's going to happen? What's your evidence? What makes you feel this? What makes you think this? Could it be something else? And once you start doing that, it really does put you on the front foot. whatever it takes for you to relax, think about doing that. Like I said, sometimes you might not be able to go into a state of relaxation straight away if your blood's pumping and your adrenaline's going. Maybe do something else to, what's the word, to deflect what it is, you know, replace what it is that's going on. Switch things, confuse your brain, and then get to a place. And if you've got one or a few places, which is like your, what they call the happy place, if you can bring that up time and time again, like you would look at your clock, like you look at your watch, like you would look at a screenshot, have that imprinted in your head. And if you want to do your own techniques about associating that picture with a state of sense, sensations, feelings, all of that lot, you can put it all in there together. And what we're trying to do is reduce the time it takes you to get there. So a lot of the professional athletes, they have their PTs, their strength and conditioning coaches, what they'll do is they'll put them around the track, they'll get them to do all sorts of exercises where their heart rate goes up to a certain higher level, then they track how long or how fast it takes them to do recovery. And the shorter time it is in terms of recovery, especially with combat sports or professional boxers, tennis players, those sorts of things, is where they're looking at making those minute, because they're already at elite level, it's making those minute improvements of 1%, 2%, that kind of thing. Think yourself positive. So if you've come across things to do with visualization and affirmations, look at the work of Mark Taylor, psychologist who looked at working with Olympic athletes, all to do with the power of mainly visualization in terms of improving results. So if you combined existing affirmations you've already got with visualizations, but you did them every day, and if you wanted to, you can change them up as you grow. These might need to change. Very, very powerful. I've been using them for a number of years and they've always helped me out. I'm a more visual person, so a lot of stuff that goes into my head is lots of vivid pictures and things like that. I do bring in certain phrases, sentences, affirmations within that, and then I obviously speak them out aloud. But as you know, they say, in terms of self-talk, whatever you put of I am is the two most powerful words in terms of what will shape your reality after. So I don't know if you get obsessed like me, but I have a few times during the day where I will do these out aloud. Not when the kids and the wife are there, because they wonder what I'm doing, but I'll go away 2-3 minutes and I will do it as though I'm on stage in front of 1,000, 10,000 people. And my voice and the energy, everything is attuned in terms of the affirmations that I use. And that's my little pickup every day. It's no point me waiting for something to happen and then do it. I use it as part of running a healthy lifestyle. You've got a healthy lifestyle, whatever you choose to eat, it's a regular thing. And that's the way I tend to put this in. So I'm feeding my brain, going back to one of the first slides, and drip, 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 having the effect in that. Success comes in cans, not can'ts. So again, when we replace I'm not with, if you can be aware of how many times you might say, I'm not very good at. How many times you actively go in a week and think, how many times have you done that? And what have you done to change it? If you catch yourself mid-flow, you can rephrase it. That's how I originally used to do it. I talk to somebody and say, oh, hang on, let me just rephrase that. I'm learning to get better at this. And a person in front of it doesn't really know what's going on anyway. It's a conscious thing in our brains. You know, if I say that, they're going to think I'm weird. But the connection in terms of when you're doing NLP, the brain side and the linguistic side, when they're put together, they're very, very powerful. So with that, what you've got is changed thoughts, which lead to change feelings that allow new beliefs to enter. With those new actions, so you've got to take the actions that go with them. So sometimes that might be moving slightly out of your comfort zone and trying new things and constantly striving to get ahead in terms of whatever your chosen field is or whatever it might be, leads to new conditions. So somebody said here they're doing a webinar like on a global level. You know, some people, they might start out doing a webinar or a Zoom session very local, and then they go to regional or national and then maybe global. So again, it's all kind of relative, but these are the opportunities that are in your line as you go forward using all this, and then it all leads to new results. They say it's roughly 21 days to form or break a habit. So if there's one thing at the moment that you feel you'd like to embark on, or you're halfway through, why don't you give that some thought and maybe come back to the group and keep us all posted about what you're doing. So at this stage, what I would say is if you've got one affirmation, great. If not, why don't you create or update your existing powerful affirmation that obviously we all know needs to be done in the present tense. And like you would have breakfast, they say breakfast is the most important meal, have it as your breakfast, you know, first thing in the morning, get up and kind of shout your way through that little bit of a mantra. It really, if you start talking about all the other spiritual aspects in terms of things on a cellular level, in terms of the in terms of the cells and everything else, it does make a huge difference. This is something that I've had to learn and deal with in my life, but in terms of learning the lessons and moving on, I think years gone by, I'd be very bitter about what life or the universe had thrown at me. I spent more time effing and blinding about all those sorts of things in terms of realizing some of the best gifts that have been given to me aren't necessarily in the prettiest packages. I've cut my hands while trying to open these packages, but honest to God, they've been the best ones. You know, they've been the best learning opportunities, best things for growth. Sometimes it's brought me down to my hands and knees, but at the same time, I wouldn't have changed it. Now, in terms of people, I always believe that certain people are there for different reasons. Some people last the course, some people don't. They may be a spiritual guide, they may be a tutor, a teacher, whatever you want to call them. They may just be there for a little bit of time. Sometimes you might laugh and love and everything with these people, and other people might come along and you have to drink from the well of kind of bitterness, but they are still teachers, no matter how painful it is. So this is about learning the lessons and moving on, and actually sending out a thank you to the universe, to them. Not always easy. Focus on what's working well, no matter how small. You know, life runs so fast at the moment, especially with social media and, you know, information, the way it's kind of beamed out to us. We need to control what's coming in. That's another way of ensuring our mind is positive, what is going into the brain, even if it's being selective of your news sources and how often you take in those news sources as well, to the point of where you network sometimes, who you collaborate with, who you socialize with. It sounds a bit ruthless, but in order to keep that energy positive, I think we just got to kind of reassess that. But there's so many things that are hit at us that we forget what we've done last week in terms of celebrating our successes. So it'd be worthwhile keeping a diary or a book or some sort of journal just to jot those things in, and every week or every few days, just look through it, and you can make it as creative as you want. You can stick things in there, you can draw things in there, you can do it digitally, whatever. You know, a lot of my clients do this sort of stuff, and it boosts self-esteem, it boosts confidence, it boosts positivity, it gives them a constant self-reflection of just what they have achieved. And it doesn't need to be something the size of Mount Everest. It could be a small win that gets celebrated and recognized and appreciated along the way, especially during lockdown. For some people, just getting out of bed on a certain time and facing the world has been a little win, and fine. You know, no point us comparing ourselves to everybody else if it's going to make us feel down. And if you're going to look through social media and think, Amal's doing really well, Debs is doing really well, my life is horrible. Can't do that. We've got to be really, really careful about our influences and where we get them from. In terms of resilience, again, linked to positive thinking, but if you fell down yesterday, stand up today. And this is where all the things I've mentioned so far are really important, but your own networks, whether it's this network I'm speaking at today or other networks, it's okay to ring somebody. It's okay to share that you're not feeling too good, or let me just pick your brains. Speak to people, reach out. You're not a pest. A lot of people think, I didn't want to ring you because, you know, that's sometimes the best time to ring somebody, when you're going through those sorts of things. If they're the right people, they will make the time, or they will contact you back later on. And you don't want it to be a morning session. You want it to be somewhere where you get listened to. There's some objective discussion and a little plan forward, even a couple of steps. But I guarantee you that will make you feel better. I have a few friends that I ring them once or twice a week just for a little catch up. We talk about all sorts of things, but guaranteed we're both laughing. You know, whoever's on the call, we're all laughing. And it just kind of takes me into a different direction each time. I don't do it because I'm down. I just do it because I like to catch up with them, but it just has that knock-on effect. And there's several. So if you draw a little circle, say on a piece of paper, and then you had the word me in it, that's you and everything you can control. And then a circle that kind of circumferences that on the outside. Who do you put in that circle that you can reach out to, connect with? And it might be people far away from your industry, far away from what you do, that might give you some of the best time, some of the best advice, some of the best food for thought. Then another circle outside of that, and you can keep going in terms of at what point, who do you call for what reason? I don't need to tell you about this, but for me, there's a lot of free apps out there, some low-cost apps, digital, where you could use to focus on the present. If you kind of do anything around what you're doing at the moment, and also mindfulness related things, these will also help you with those pattern interrupts I was talking about before. So the insight timer one, the bell, I love that, because you can set reminders. That ding is a bit of a challenge of how long I can hear it. And there's various other things you can do, but I do it based on my day. You know, we've got kind of early morning, mid-morning, lunchtime, late afternoon, kind of early evening, and then nighttime. So I kind of use different ones and different things. So it keeps it fresh, doesn't get monotonous, constantly hacking the brain. This it means a lot to me. That's Christopher Biggins. But yeah, in India, they started off doing laughter therapy workshops, and then they're right the way around the world. But a good belly laugh, you know, there's research to show just smiling releases endorphins and happy chemicals. So imagine what a full belly laugh would do, or just having a laugh with somebody. And this is what happens during the week. If I'm not doing it with my wife and kids, having a good laugh about this, that, and the other, especially my youngest one who's 5, she'll just come out with something completely wacky, only a 5-year-old could, and that gets you. But there are other people. And on top of that, there are other things I go and listen to or watch that keep me laughing, smiling. Relaxation, key part of it, no matter how busy we get, factor in. So like you would factor a meeting, like you would factor a networking event, have you factored any time in between the day and the week in order to take a time out? So this is besides doing review work. This is besides working on yourself. This is actual just a time out, not a time out checking notifications, but a pure time out. It doesn't have to be long. So take things one step at a time. Start planning, or review your plans, commit to the action, act, review it, reward yourself, then record it. Increase the volume of what you do, and then share the love, help others. There's no greater feeling than being of service to other people, as I'm sure other people have been of service to ourselves. So whether it's paying it forward, whether it's pro bono, whatever it is, it could be none of those. It just could be something guiding you to help somebody or other. I've had some really weird conversations at bus stops, in queues, and some things just guided me to stroke up a conversation with somebody, and it's got pretty deep in the middle of Sainsbury's or Tesco or whatever it might be. But I've been able to help somebody. I call it kind of bus stop coaching, but essentially I don't know what it was that was driving me to help these people, but it was, and I followed my intuition. Be good to yourself, take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be there for other people. So you need to be optimum as much as you can for yourself first before. And then these are just some of the things I associate myself with on a kind of very, very regular basis. So this is just a dark comedy. The Gentleman, which is on iPlay, I've watched it a million times. It still brings a laughter. I still find it funny. It still makes me chuckle. Obviously, there's family and everything that goes with that, from conversations to sometimes just being in each other's company without no conversation and still feeling that frequency of love and energy and everything. YouTube is a great resource for me for talks, for stand-up comedians, all sorts of things. It's complete free resource. There's loads of stuff on there. There's podcasts on there that are filmed. Good friends, different types of music, a certain type of music, so one of the pattern interrupts what I mentioned before in terms of music is think about your walkout theme music. What one piece of music would you like playing as you walk out into a stadium or on stage, or one piece of music that your head naturally starts nodding, your fingers start clicking? What is that one tune, and how can you associate that with happy vibes? Because you can use that time and time again. This is just me. I'm a child of the 70s. I love watching Columbo. It's usually on 5 USA on a Sunday. I've watched millions of episodes again and again and again, but there's a lot of NLP, there's a lot of coaching in terms of the way he asks questions. But the wardrobe's dead hilarious. Coming, when he's late 60s, early 70s, then it's obviously there's other episodes. But it's something that I can completely time out with. It's a kind of another mindfulness activity, although it being watching Columbo. And then there's things in nature which I'll approach using a mindfulness approach. So depending on the type of weather, I'll be able to listen to the rustle of the leaves, the flowers. If it's a really hot day, the sun on my face, the feeling stones or twigs. And you get to a certain level when you start slowing your walks down. Even though you've been on that walk 50 times before, you start noticing things you previously not noticed before. So wherever you go, whether it's in the woods or anywhere else. So any questions